Health Minute is brought to you by St. Francis Health. We listen, we heal.
Well, heart health gained more attention after Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest during a game last year. And as Wendy Gillette reports, he's now bringing a new focus on the response.
Bills safety Damar Hamlin has returned to life as normal, on and off the field. But now part of his daily routine revolves around his heart after he suffered cardiac arrest during a game in Cincinnati in January 2023.
Make sure you take preventative measures, get screening and, just check up on your health, but also know the, reactive measures.
Hamlin recently took part in an event in New York City as captain of HeartMates, a partnership with the medical device company Abbott to build a community of those who know the struggle of heart conditions, including 8-year-old Tony Daly from Las Vegas, who underwent surgery to close a hole in his heart when he was born premature.
We like to think of him as our miracle baby and as a way of spreading it back to everybody that may be in a similar situation.
Hamlin's cardiac arrest on the field helped a national TV audience see the importance of access to defibrillators and learning how to perform CPR.
You could learn CPR and, you can save a life. You're just as good as Superman.
Cardiologists say it's also imperative to keep your heart healthy, so emergency steps won't be needed.
The simple stuff really matters, and so blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, staying active, not smoking, eating a healthy diet, maintaining good stress levels, sleeping well.
That resonates with Lakeisha Brown from Houston, who developed advanced heart failure and received an Abbott heart device. She sees how Hamlin's heart crisis has improved awareness.
People are becoming more aware. They're not feeling well, that type of thing. They'll go to the doctor, I think, a little bit more.
She knows firsthand that taking action is vitally important to recovery. Wendy Gillette, CBS News, New York.